Today we are going to be looking at the continuous conflicts in the DRC, the Democratic Republic of Congo. And we understand that that crisis spans over 30 years, ever since the Tutsis, the Hutsis in Rwanda had to, go over that civil war. It has not known any stop. Talking about the crisis in the DRC. And the big question is, what is really happening? What is the major cause of the civil unrest and, of course, of the crisis in the DRC? And how best can we put a stop to all this that has been going on in the Democratic Republic of Congo? Well, on Friday, we saw whereby a very huge amount of people were killed. And, of course, we also saw the intervention of the M23. That's a kind of a force, backed up by Rwanda, that is supposed, to bring some respite to the DRC. So we're going to be talking about all this today as we go on the program Africa Discourse. And to look at all this this afternoon, we are so privileged to have two gentlemen. We have Don Tunsa Igibo, a public affairs analyst. You're welcome to the program Africa Discourse.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Okay. And also, too, we are also going to be joined by Frank Ehiosun, an author, and of course is also a public affairs analyst. Frank Ehiosun, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'm pleased to be here.
All right, if I hear you clearly. All right, thank you so much for joining us, Frank Ehiosun. All right, so gentlemen, I'll start with Frank Ehiosun now because you are joining us virtually. Now, Frank Ehiosun, please help us make sense of what you think is going on in the DRC. Like I said, the crisis that we are experiencing in the DRC spans over 30 years. And it's been one big issue that it looks as if successive government has not been able to put a stop to the crisis. What is really the issue? What do you think is happening? Help us make a sense of it.
In my opinion, I would say that the crisis in the DRC goes beyond 30 years. It actually dates back to the foundation of the country. From the independence, it's been a buffet of crisis. That is the truth. The relative peace they enjoyed, where there was not so much of crisis as you have heard, was under the reign of the dictator so-called Joseph Desire Mobutu. Under his dictatorship in Zaire, he changed the name from the Congo in 1971 to Zaire. So apart from that maximum force that he used to ensure some sense of tranquility, the country has always been riddled with crisis. It's an unfortunate mix, but that has been the case. This one right now is a crisis that just took a new dimension because the opposition had a swell. There's never really been peace in the sense of what is expected of a normal nation state. So the DRC is actually classified as a failed state because it has retained that outlook for quite some time. The present dude, the Colonel Tanga, as his name goes, his posture for me is peculiar. And unfortunately, he seemed to be gaining quite some popular support from the masses in the country. Even when he was not too long ago the head of the Electoral Commission of the country.
All right, so we will come back to you, Frankie, so as we go on. Now, Mr. Donigebo, now there are perhaps so many analyses and so many ways to look at the ongoing crisis in the DRC. It's somehow difficult to really place it now. Some say it's as a result of mineral resources that the country is so blessed with. Some say because of rebel forces, trying to infiltrate the political structure in the DRC. From your own understanding, what do you think is going on in DRC?
Yeah, quite well, thank you. You said it, mineral resources. The DRC is very blessed with a lot of minerals, all types of different stones, diamonds to say the least. So because this country is so rich, there are virtually interests from every part of the world, from the wide, wide west to the Eastern Bloc. So they want to always have their protege on ground who would help siphon those very mineral resources out of the country. Whether you're talking about coming in through construction as well means to kind of take those minerals, because there's this saying that in Congo, when you're given a road to construct, you end up making more money than the money you were given to do the job, because when you excavate, you find diamonds and all sorts of types of precious minerals. So with the people living in the country, the DRC residents being the biggest victim of the blessings they got from God, the interested parties from the Western world to the East and the presence of Chinese and army rebel groups to help control territories and to have a competitive advantage, just like we have in Sambisa Forest, where it becomes impossible for the central government to be in control so that they can then in turn continuously milk the country dry, is to me one of the key reasons why the problems in DRC will never stop. But when the world got a little richer, when there were more bilateral relationships, working with the system that was established by the Americans after the Second World War, relative to the open market system, it means that there will be kind of less interest in creating conflict in zones and through the back door, constantly looting and taking minerals that belongs to the country, that obviously end up not in control of the government. And now that the world is in more crisis, well, with the leading countries like the US having a president that does things differently to an extent, it will create a bit of more desperation for those other countries to maybe have something to lean on. So I think that is probably why this rearming of these rebels, supplying of weapons to create stability so that they can as well trade with them to benefit, to augment the economic instability in the West.
Because we really need to understand, how do we really situate it now? Is it more of domestic issues, domestic crisis, or like what you rightly said, because of Eastern interest, Western interest, and all that?
Well, like you always know, the problem starts the way it starts from the Western interest. From the beginning, these things are hidden, are kept underneath, swept underneath the carpet for people not to understand what is really going on. And then it transcends from that selfish interest into becoming a local issue, whereby the people within the rural areas and the urban areas in the DRC Congo, knowing fully well certain elements within their state is benefiting by interfacing with these fifth columnists, like I call them, the invaders, if you like, economic invaders, by creating stability. They themselves will turn around and also develop interest. So by so doing, you create what they call a conflict amongst ethnic groups, among different factions, because everybody wants a piece of the pie. So on that note, because they're very uneducated people, lots of people are not very exposed, they don't have wisdom, they even fight, or they engineer to put together for peanuts, because money is flowing down the back door through the black markets, and automatically people start to benefit from it. The warlords and the people they use will then end up recruiting more in the local communities. And then the problem becomes very bad like it is now. It's spiraled out of hand, and then there becomes a more deeper lack of trust within the different ethnic groups or different regions who wants to do business with the negative economic influx of black money into the economy, and they end up destabilizing the central government. And then that means more flow of arms, small light weapons, and to destabilize the region and the state in particular. As long as there is natural resources on that ground and they are blessed with these resources, you get to find out that for more than 3 decades, just like my brother on Zoom said just now, for more than 3 decades, for many years, the DRC to Zaire and back to DRC has always had troubles, only because they are endowed with natural minerals. Likewise, other countries with minerals, whether it is oil, whether it is gold, whether it is diamond, tantalite, whether it is californium, whether it is uranium, like in the Niger and Burkina Faso, every country that has natural minerals, they have the Western interest there, and that problem constantly exists, and it is never ending.
All right, so the program is still Africa Discourse on independent television, and this afternoon we are trailing the ongoing crisis in the Democratic Republic of Congo, that's the DRC, and of course what is really happening there, and what is the major cause of the crisis. We'll take a short pause, and when we return, we'll begin to see the interest of, groups, if you like now, like the M23, that's we're told on Friday, had to capture the entire Goma. Now, Goma is one of the towns, in the DRC, one of the cities now, and of course, the M23 was reported to be advancing towards Kinshasa. That's the capital of the DRC. So, a lot of persons are of the opinion that the M23 is more of harm, than good in the DRC. But we understand that the M23 is of the opinion that they are out there to protect the minority group, because the M23 now is also backed up by Rwanda, and Rwanda a next door neighbor to the DRC. So we look at all this and see how we can, begin to provide solutions to the conflict in the DRC. We'll take a short pause now. We'll be right back. Thank you one more time. The program is still live directly on independent television in Benin, and we are looking at the ongoing issues in the Democratic Republic of Congo, whereby thousands of Congolese have been killed, have been maimed, and of course have been rendered almost useless for life now. All right, so we've got guests here, Don Igebo, also public affairs analyst. Now, Mr. Don, now let us look at the presence of organizations now. Now, the M23, remember the M23 was formed sometime in March 2000, on the 23rd of March 2009. That was about 5 years after the crisis really began in Congo, in DRC. And of course, the M23 initially was out to protect the minority group, the Tutsi. The Tutsi broke out from Rwanda. Rwanda and DRC, they lie side by side as neighbors. So you have the parts of the Tutsi breaking from Rwanda into the DRC. And of course, the M23, of the opinion that, okay, they were out to protect the minority group. But somehow, we saw that crisis came up. And to the extent that the DRC army now had to, bring the M23 into its army. So they came into the DRC's army, but that was not even going to help the matter because issues came up until they now broke off and all that. Now, the position of the M23 in all this crisis going on in the DRC, how would you want to posit it? Would you want to say that the M23 is really out for good, or is more of catastrophe in the ongoing issues?
Well, any conflict that involves the use of arms as a way of resolving the differences is never a good one. Well, if you say that the DRC army has invited the M23 to come in and support them, maybe because they felt like there's an interest from the other end to further strengthen the resolve why the rebels has gotten up to fight the central government. So I believe that Rwanda might be wanting some sort of stability within that region. So if they were put out there to support and protect the minority, solely practically because the government currently has given solace to the minority that falls within the Ugandan landscape, if you like. You know what I mean? Because it now means that the minority tribe also shares the same heritage in Rwanda. So now that there's a push from the opposite enemy's end, that is why I think that they are coming in to try and push back those rebels. And you know what that means. It means so many lives will be lost. And it pains me to understand or to want to believe that Africa, that is so blessed, is constantly embroidered in all sorts of different military conflicts, whereby we don't produce arms, we don't export arms, we don't make money from arm exportation, and yet we are the one who pays the most lives, who pay the biggest price with the influx of small light arms and, influx of light arms and small weapons. It is quite painful because at the end of the day, whether it is on the rebel side who also feel they may have a right to challenge the central government, just like you have in many sub-Saharan African states or countries, the same also applies in Congo. Remember, Congo is a rich land. Whenever there's peace, you know that the way they're siphoning and paying money back into the system is relatively working in the direction of the superpowers who is creating the instability. Because for you to fight wars, you must have a route of arms being supplied to the people to stand up. And that arrangement is usually between the power blocks, whether from the aspect of the neocons or the KGBs or the Al-Nasri Front or whatever powerhouse you call it. The problem and the conflict in Congo, DRC, is not different from the ones other countries would face without actually carrying weapons. It's all about economic sabotage. It's all about taking from people.
Yeah, but we're talking about a situation whereby people are dying. I mean,
yeah, I mean, that is why when Donald Trump came into power, I know he may have a very bad immigration policy that I can never really understand why he thinks along those lines, and then affects everybody who is in the country that is not captured in the immigration system yet. And maybe they've not committed any crime and is more than happy to deport them back to their, in quote, original country.
At the risk of not trying to digress, why would you want to
I just want to buttress
Trump
on that point.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to say is that people die. I just talked about Trump. He actually, I said, even if he has a bad policy immigration-wise, but it's actually going to similar countries like in Ukraine and Russia, and other countries to say, well, I'm pulling out of those wars because people are dying. The power that be before now, especially American being the leader, does not really care if people die during conflict as a way of them getting what they want. Because if they do, I don't think the influx of those weapons can be smuggled into Africa. Most times these weapons are imported directly from one seaport to Africa.
Yeah.
And they do nothing about it. So obviously, just that people are afraid to speak about it and point their fingers, if they really do care about people dying, and I don't think that they will be supplying these weapons. After all, there's this euphoria of the depopulation agenda. Whether it is right or wrong, you can give them guns, step back and watch them kill each other. So all these things is something that is very disheartening, is very depressing, and there's no end in sight, really.
All right, like we tried to, say earlier on, trying to bring the M23 in, and saying that the M23 actually gets its support from Rwanda. That's the next door neighbor to the DRC. Now, would you want to say that maybe we would have asked this question earlier on, not too late though. Now, would you want to say that the conflicts going on in the DRC is probably an offshoot of what may have been wrested in Rwanda? Remember the genocide, the civil war in Rwanda. In Rwanda, the Tutsi war and the Hutus war and all that. Some say that it is an offshoot of it that is going on in DRC. Would you want to subscribe to that?
Well, I think there's a genuine difference because Rwanda has since found their footing. After the genocide, obviously, for guns and bullets to fly around and people go down 6 feet, the source of those weapons, to me, is the biggest problems. So now all these years has come and gone. Rwanda has become a very successful state.
Yeah, but the conflict in the DRC is more of ethnic
No,
issues.
I mean, Rwanda, through the military junta, who has become a civilian president, but still rules like a military man, has been able to stabilize Rwanda.
Yeah.
But Congo has not been very lucky because outside the idea of ethnic groups, development comes, you have no uprising. Whenever there's money flowing, there's these tendencies of African leadership to shortchange the other groups of people. By the time it's now, politics now comes and is played out as ethnic groups problem. And then the problem is never ending. It's probably because you're not you don't speak my tribe, that's what you're doing. But if development comes, you'll find peace. Like in the Niger Delta. During the time when they got rid of King Sarowiwa, it was all because they said, well, we need development. Until the boys picked up arms, They negotiated. For some reason, there's peace there now. So I don't think the Rwanda thing, for how long the Congo DRC problem has gone on, has a similarity anymore, because the Congo area has never had absolute peace. But I can tell you, Rwanda has really, really developed. And no matter how big or small they are now practically a leading country in the African state, because things are working for that country. You know, from their economic activities, from the airline to the way things are done, compared to other African states, they are leaders in the industry, and that is all down to Kagame.
All right,
the
so
very president
what would you say about the government in DRC? Would you want to say that that's the government of the president of Nshekezi now, that's the name now. Now, would you want to say that perhaps the president there has displayed an outright inability to really handle the political issues, the crisis in Rwanda, in DRC?
In DRC. Well, many has come and gone. And before you take up those positions, you should know exactly what you're going into. So on that note, I can tell you maybe, yeah, he may have failed, that he could not piece it together. But at the same time, you have to understand that people have already tested the blood diamond money. The minute they've tested the blood diamond money, then the factor of the building blocks within this country comes in, like the generals. Whether you have a democratically elected president or not, the generals in the state will continuously engage.
Maybe the government has interest too?
No, I mean, yeah, they may have interest, but the military junta and the Western alignment will constantly do their businesses together. The only problem, I think, would have created you and I to have a conversation that maybe the president has not been able to put it together is not far-fetched from the collapse of certain powers that be within the Western bloc. Because, you know, every country has their interest. And based on their interest, they can decide to push any militia group.
When you say collapse of the powers that be within the Western bloc, how exactly do you mean?
Americans are the leaders of the war, or leaders of the world today, one of the major leaders. And now they have a president that is very advanced to the usual norms of how the Americans and the European Union work together, or the NATO, for instance. President Trump is the opposite of Joe Biden, Obama, or Bush. He does not want to have any major business with the NATO countries, or even do things that they do. So obviously times has changed, and many a times when these things happen, they said the dogs and the baboon soaks in blood. There's always that change in interest, whereby just like you have a government in Africa, or maybe a governor, the opposition comes in, there's always a collateral damage.
But the DRC is not a NATO nation.
No, I mean, understand what I'm saying? The fallout from President Trump's position with the NATO states and their interest would have created snowballing into new people wanting to rise up.
Okay.
Being supported maybe by a fifth columnist or a different nation altogether. It could be from the Russian bloc, it could come from Iran, it could come from, because people are interested in these minerals. So people might not want to gear up another problems to challenge the current power debate, because maybe America, England, Germany, France, and all these countries might be in sync to say, well, we support the government in the center. And by the time Donald Trump comes in as a leader and is no longer playing that card, other people can rise up and at the same time know that Trump will not join the existing system to fight them. Then they become bloodshed, because they also want to take over, which means power, resource, and control is what the world is all about.
Okay. All right, so yeah, we had to make, we made this video. This was what happened on Friday, whereby Goma, Goma is one of the major cities in the DRC, in the eastern part of the DRC. And of course, okay, these are members of the M23 now, whereby they had to seize Goma and making advancements towards Kinshasa. That's the capital of the DRC. So you can see some of the footage and the videos of the civil unrest, the conflicts going on in the Democratic Republic of Congo. So this has to do with the African Union, you know, trying to see how they can come together and see how they can talk about the issues in the DRC. All right, so we'll take a short pause now. Please, PD, we're going to have this video to roll one more time after this time out. We'll take a short pause now so that we'll just see how we can take the other segment. Now, when we return, we're going to be looking at what, what we may call subnationals. I mean, the inability of subnationals to really come into nations that are at war. I mean, in Africa, we have the Africa Union. Africa Union has not been able to come into what is going on in the DRC. And of course, if we stretch it further on the global scene, we have the United Nations. We have the NATO. The NATO couldn't come into what has been going on between Ukraine and Russia. The United Nations cannot come into what is going on. So when we return after this break, we'll see why the subnationals, I mean, of what extent, of what use are they if they cannot resolve issues, you know, within or among nations, you know, in the world. We'll take a short pause. We'll be right back. Please stay tuned. Thank you one more time. The program is still right here on independent television, Africa Discourse. And we are looking at the ongoing conflicts in the DRC, the Democratic Republic of Congo. And we still have Don Igebo here. Now, Don, let's look at the presence of, you know, multinationals. I mean, nations of the world being part of subnationals now. You have, in Africa, you have the Africa Union, and of course, you have the ECOWAS, the Economic Community of West African States. I mean, it had to take the bold step of Niger and some other countries that, hey, we are backing out of the ECOWAS. We're no more interested, because they didn't really see the need to be there, undermining the fact that the ECOWAS had to do with purely economic issues and all that. But we saw what gave rise to Niger and some other countries backing out of, you know, ECOWAS, because of the political, very unsettled political issues in this country that led to military junta coming in and taking over. Now, we have the African Union. DRC for the past 30 years has been in turmoil, and the AU, the African Union, has not been able to come and wade into the issue in the DRC. What is going on? Speak to it. What is going on?
Well, it's obvious that whoever creates the problems and tries to solve the problem by applying decoy through establishment that is considered legitimate, like the United Nations and maybe the subnational, like the African Union, which they engineered to set up in a non-violent platform, whereby they are supposed to drive economy and push policies that will help the development of Africa. Because remember, there's always this saying that, oh, where Africa needs help. Like when Donald Trump was saying the other day, he was pulling out aids to certain African countries with regards money that was coming in to deal with AIDS problem, if you know what I mean. And the beginning and the end of that problem, how it started, as always has a kind of an underlying undertone that was not particularly expressed adequately. So people are confused because the country that has pulled out has got to understand that maybe they're just wasting their time and maybe they're being shortchanged from the powers that be, who perhaps wants to assume that they are here to help. Whereas after so many years, they can't really find any genuine development and progress, because the people that they support to be presidents, the KPIs and the checks and balances, even with their involvement, ends up seeing real time those money of trade being given to the company siphoned back to the West. So it shows that there's a deception within the system, why the African Union, the European nations, or the EU, or the UN are under the control of certain interests. It's only that they're just pushing that for people to assume that there's hope with regards swapping your transactional trade natural minerals for what they consider to be a system in place to help. So if DRC has been in trouble for many years, and likewise other countries that are constantly destabilized, and the African nation has not been able to really get up to perhaps take a position like the military juntas has done in Burkina Faso and Niger and whatnot, it is only because the system was designed from the very beginning to fail, why they are pretending that these people were supposed to represent you. But deep down, they still control those African Union, they still control the EU, they still control the United Nations. That is why the problems in Ukraine and Russia was persistent, because Ukrainians cannot make decisions for themselves.
Now, perhaps we may even have to stretch it further because when we talk about Africa Union, some will say that Africa Union may not have what it takes to really bring the crisis in the DRC to a halt.
They do.
But we have the United Nations. We have the peacekeeping mission of the United Nations. Now, remember when we had issues in Liberia, UN, even some Nigerian military men had to be members of the United Nations Peacekeeping Force agency. And of course, they were able to bring the political issues to a standstill in Liberia. But right now, DRC for 30 years. I mean, if Africa Union has really not been able to wade into the issues, one would have expected that the United Nations, with all the technology, with all the military, heavy military wares and all that, they should be able to really say, hey, this thing should stop in the DRC.
With the Liberian case where you assume or perhaps say that the problem was eventually put to a halt, not without a price. Where's Charles Taylor? Charles Taylor today is incarcerated and put away for getting up and standing up for saying things that he believed was right. But after a long time, he was tried in The Hague. That was the same Hague that Donald Trump just accused lawyers being brought from The Hague to try and convict him in America. So because Trump is president, he can speak out. There were court injunctions for him not to speak on those issues. But who is to speak for Charles Taylor today? His fate is between him and his God. So all these particular bodies, African Union, United Nations, and peacekeepers in Ivory Coast shot at Gbagbo's presidential villa to get rid of him when they claimed that Ouattara, who was married to a French woman, won the presidential election.
Let me read out an exception and an extract for you, because when we talk about United Nations peacekeepers or peacekeeping mission, perhaps the world really needs to begin to look into. Now, we're talking about the crisis in the DRC now. A UN peacekeeping mission was put in place in 1999, and of course the current force known as MONUSCO was made up of 10,000 troops. However, only the Force Intervention Brigade was allowed to carry out offensive operations against the armed groups. It was his force that helped defeat the M23 in 2013, and of course we are told that as their efforts went on, the forces in the DRC now began to see this force brigade that they were really not doing what they were supposed to do, as trying to keep a peace.
That's exactly what it is. They will never do what they're supposed to do, because in the first place, the United Nations peacekeeper has no business in Africa. Africans should not really have the problems they have if they don't give them the weapons to fight and at the same time pretend to be peacekeepers. So by coming in as peacekeepers, they start to steal your natural minerals. For doing that, they'll have to do business with certain interests within the country, which will now snowball into continuous problems without end. Remember the late General Sani Abacha said, any problem that persists in a country more than 24 hours, you know that the government in the center has a hand in it.
So what are you trying to say? In the DRC, Felix Nseketsi, that's his name. No, are you trying to accuse him?
No, I'm not accusing Felix. Felix is handicapped. Felix will be supported by the particular group. Once that support pulls up from what happens at the center in terms of the world powers, when there's a crack within the world power and the formation, trust me, there will be consequences at the bottom. Because everything that is happening within the space with regards power, resource, and control has vested interest, even if a dummy is being sold to the people to believe that, okay, well, there's a war in Liberia. My uncle went to the war in Liberia, represented the Nigerian president. Ordinarily,
as a member of the United...
no, as an ECOMOG soldier.
Okay.
Africans are good enough, they're able to defend their own land. They're able to create their own system that works for their people. I mean, from the death of Ken Saro-Wiwa, it was not very long ago. Before that, the Niger Delta was a peaceful place. So they will give you the reasons to understand why you should fight. They will come and pretend as if they're providing peace. They come in through that means, and the problem is never ending. So I will not come up and say that the president of DRC could not do what he needs to do. But they are also victims and at the same time suspects, because they benefit from the fall-off of the lack of progress and economic development in those countries. If they were wise enough to do things like the UAE does, for example, like in the United Arab Emirates, for instance, like in Saudi Arabia, like in Qatar, whereby the money meant for the citizens of this country is truly used to develop them. People will not get up to fight the center. So the people will realize that their leaders cares about them, the development is really there, they are benefiting from the natural resources that God has given to them, whether it is oil, gold, or diamond. On that note, you find out that their leaders and their kings remain in power because why? The people are truly believing or understand and can see that the representation is real and they are benefiting from it. But in Africa, they give them, and at the same time, they encourage them to be greedy. And because the African leaders does not fully understand to be wise enough to make sure that they don't heed on to those sort of problems, they end up running into hot waters like now. Because like in Congo, there's abject poverty there, like many other African countries. That poverty is what leads to uprising.
In the midst of plenty, abject poverty.
Yeah, so that is the problem. That is what I was telling you about Donald Trump. It felt like I was digressing. That is why I talked about the Niger Delta issue. Before Niger Delta problem came up, it is issues like this, whereby they pollute your water, they don't clean it. People in the communities don't benefit anything. They end up making so much money, and people from elsewhere owns those blocks. It's annoying. What they do, they end up resenting the government, and since they had the amnesty in place, even if the best development has still not come to those areas, effort is being made. If they had done that from the beginning, there will be no uprising.
Okay, as we commence the session now.
Just to round off, the primary motive and the reasons why there's problems in the African states is because they are blessed with natural resources. And the people who are interested in the resources keep playing games, which is the Western countries. The UN is not a peacekeeping body when things are not happening in this country.
When things are involved.
Yeah, in Ivory Coast, because they were supporting Ouattara, because there was some money they needed that was in the reserves of Ivory Coast in France, 32 billion euros, and Gbagbo refused to give it to them. The peacekeepers, in quote, fired at the villa and got rid of the president in order to access that money during the financial crisis. So everything has an underlying factor, yeah.
All right, so as we commence our descent now, I mean, for a conflict that has been on for 30 years, over three decades, that's a long time. So, I mean, how do we begin to look at solutions? Because we've talked about the presence of the M23 that seems not to be yielding more the way it's supposed to go, yielding result the way it's supposed to be. We've also talked about the the United Nations peacekeeping forces that has also not been yielding a positive result. So how do we begin to look at solutions in order for this?
Well, I think the solution is we here in Nigeria that is talking from here first needs to get our homes together. Once our nation is okay, we can then lend a helping hand to the other brothers. It's just about sensitization. Making this
you mean Nigeria should...
No, it's about sensitization. Nigeria is a leading player in the sub-African region. You know, they can continuously speak on a level of leadership.
Yeah, so, but I do know that at times our military men are parts of members of the UN peacekeeping forces.
No, I mean, you say, how do we solve it?
Okay, you're looking at Nigeria.
I don't believe it's going to be solved by the barrel of the gun. I don't think so, because by so doing with the barrel of the gun, there's a lot of things we don't see that happens that constantly fuel this problem. If these leaders can genuinely develop their people in Africa and genuinely bring about development to their doorstep and detest greed to a very large extent, that is the only way the African nation can start to progress. So many countries in Burma in the Far East, they have a lot of unrest as well because of poverty. You know, until the leaders of this nation starts to really dig deep and, you know, look at the same Burkina Faso, the military guy is doing wonders. I've not really had time to follow through what he's doing, but a lot of testimony says,
yeah, I think the people are happy. Traoré, that's a young man's name.
Yeah, but many times they made an attempt on his life. So the question is, you should ask, who's doing that? If he's doing what the country wants, who within the country are they using as a mercenary to try and attempt his life? They attempted his life. Did they tell you that those that attempted his life got away? No. They were neutralized.
So are you trying to see Western interest there too?
Oh, bro, that's always been the case. These people ain't going nowhere as long as Africa is rich. So it is for Africa to now say, you know what? We will share this chunk with you. whatever we get as African nation, we will develop Africa. We have to develop to a point whereby they can no longer manipulate Africans. That is when the true peace will exist in Africa. For that to happen, they'll come and use different ways and means. When there was riot during the NSAS conflict in Nigeria, remember Twitter was banned. Twitter was a weapon that was light on the Androids of every Nigerian. They started to put up fake news to get people angry to come out there and destabilize the peace in the country.
But it was also Nigerians that were doing that, not some form of Western interest.
No, the Western interest. The Twitter MD before Elon Musk bought it over and called it X was using that Twitter as a way to lie that, oh, the Nigerian army has shot at people at Lekki toll gate.
You will take that as an allegation now.
No, it was all over the news. There were videos.
Yeah, because the news we got, the news that the authority told us was that a lot of persons were using, social media now, bloggers everywhere.
But I'm sure you realize that Twitter was banned in Nigeria.
I know.
And then they started begging.
Yeah,
because they make billions every day from doing trade in Nigeria.
It was the Nigerian government that said they had to put stop to that.
Yeah, because they started crying.
The presence of Twitter then was almost a kind of a threat to the
yeah, because Twitter started crying because they make more money in Africa than they make in America. So when they got banned...
It was even Nigerians that were complaining because in the first place, the government went against their rights. I mean, rights of
wait. With all due respect, sometimes I know we know there is problem in our country, but we mix it up and just generalize everything. Somebody was killed in Anambra between police and what... It still happens till today. And there was an uprising that NSAS, the SARS people should be disbanded. It was a certain unit within the police force. Why did that now metamorphosize into a bigger thing? And at the end, there was no end, no tail, no end. There was no results. But in the north, there was no uprising. All the things that was destroyed in the south was destroyed because there was no end to that problem. Anyway, I am not saying that our people does not have the right to protest against those things, but the level at which they took it to, not even allow Twitter to start taking advantage of that frustration and anger, to not make them, more people come out to revolt in the country. And when the government banned them from making money from using data and downloads, they started crying.
Anyway,
and I think it's something that they will never try again.
Away from that now, you've talked about the need for Africans to really develop Africa until these Western interests can no longer infiltrate.
Yes, make an impact, because we can build our own hospitals, we can provide our own electricity, we can provide our own education. Africans are very intelligent and smart people. Many Africans drive the Americans and the European nations' major establishment.
Now, what about the natural resources, Donny Igebo? The natural resources that is the major issue in all of this crisis. What do we do with them? I mean, that's a very funny question.
This is what I'm saying. I remember President Goodluck Jonathan said, what we make from oil is a token, because we have the IOCs operating in Nigeria, ripping the Nigerian state off. If they make 100 billion, they probably give Nigeria 9 billion. They steal the rest from multiplying whatever they think they've done in operations to move the money. Whatever money we get is still enough to make many Nigerians come out and proudly say that they have so much money, they have nothing to do with it. That money, use it to develop your people. When your people see that you've developed them and you keep developing them and they have hope, trust me, they will stop being angry at you. And when that development comes and the love becomes stronger, then it creates no room for outsiders to infiltrate you anymore.
So in all of all this, I think we have to bet it, on the corridor of leaders in Africa.
Yes, of course, 100%. The African leaders are the problems. And some of the ones that are good, even when they are trying their best, because the level of poverty is so much and certain people who don't understand the information, they get confused. They end up putting out wrong words or addressing the issues in a weird way that they don't understand that Rome was not built in a day. And so many other factors within the state, like people getting, misled, and they having certain beliefs, that beliefs will make you make money, they don't believe in hard work, for example. So all these factors is bedeviling us. And that is when we should seek the face of God to help us understand that, if we know what we're doing as a people and the development keeps coming. Say, for example, you're patronized to do a project for your people. And if you do that project, you can make maybe 20 million as a profit. Why not do that project and make 18 or 20 million and give a good project to your people and keep talking about it, rather than giving them a bad project and making 100 million and then the project does not serve the purpose. So we as Africans should be the one to hold the bulls by the horn. Whatever money we get from the IOCs for now, we can use it to develop us. And by the time we become unified, we can demand more from them. And probably we say to them, we don't need you anymore. You can go. It's happened in many countries in the world. So Africans need to sit up so that at the end of the day, development is to come. Healthcare should come to, we have money, we have resources, we have human capacity, we have IGR, we can actually develop our people. Not for Nigerians to be buying Bentleys and Rolls-Royce Phantom, having multitude of buildings everywhere that they don't use. Look at the other day, somebody in Abuja has over 738 duplexes in one area. What are you looking for? And when you trace the source of that money, it's from the Nigerian ports. And you blame the foreigners for treating you because we develop greed to the point of no return. We kill greed, we continue to try to bury greed and get the people to realize that even when they don't believe in you and you actually do those projects, and over time they see that you're trying, before you know their mind starts to change. So when people want to use them against you, they will resent them. That is the only way we can really get Africa to keep going.
Yeah, so we want to say thank you to you, Don Etiosa-Egibo. Thank you so
very
much
much
for coming on the program today. And I think we've said it all on this program, that our solutions is in us. I mean, as Africans, all that we need to do to bring respite to our continent is right here. So our leaders really need to develop us, develop the African nations in such a way that this foreign interest, Western interest, Eastern interest, if we call it, should not be able to infiltrate us as a people. And of course, that's the way it has to go. Well, this is where we end the program today, Africa Discourse on Independence Celebration. My name is Evan Sunohugi. Until same time and next week, goodbye and God bless you.